When you cry in church, this is what God is doing in your life. Must watch. Light up faith you didn't come to church to break down. But what if that moment you try to hide was the exact moment heaven decided to confront you? You were fine just minutes ago, smiling, nodding, blending in like everyone else. And then it happened that a single note in the worship song, a single sentence from the pastor, or worse, nothing at all, just silence, and suddenly your chest tightened, your throat locked, and before you could stop it, tears, not polite tears, not controlled tears, but the kind that feel like something inside you just cracked open. And here's the part no one explains. Why does it happen right there in church? Why not at home? Why not alone? Why in the one place you're trying to stay composed? What if I told you those tears are not emotional weakness, they are spiritual evidence, because something is happening in you that your mind hasn't caught up with yet. And if you ignore it, you might miss the very moment God is trying to change your life. There was a woman, no name, no status, just a reputation she couldn't escape. She walked into a room full of people who judged her before she even spoke. Jesus was there. She didn't preach. She didn't explain herself. She just fell at his feet and cried. Not a few tears, but enough to wash his feet. Luke 7:38 doesn't describe logic. It describes surrender. And Jesus didn't stop her. He didn't say, control yourself. He didn't say, you're being too emotional. He received it because heaven understands what earth misunderstands. Tears in the presence of God are a language. And some of you have been speaking it without realizing it. You thought you were overwhelmed, but you were actually being touched. You thought you were losing control, but God was finally reaching the part of you you've been hiding. Because here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You've been strong for too long. Holding everything together, smiling when you're tired, saying I'm fine when you're breaking, carrying weight you were never designed to carry. And when you step into God's presence, He doesn't talk to your image, that He goes straight for your soul. That's why it feels sudden. That's why it feels intense. Because God doesn't knock gently on locked doors. Sometimes He breaks them open. Saul was on his way to destroy lives, and in a single moment, without warning, he was knocked to the ground, blinded, shaken, changed forever. God didn't wait for Saul to be ready. He interrupted him. And that's what some of you experienced in that moment of tears and interruption. Not of your service, but of your life, because you walked in thinking about bills, stress, distractions, but God had a different agenda. He saw what you buried. He saw what you ignored. He saw the silent exhaustion behind your smile. And instead of waiting, He stepped in. And when He did, everything inside you responded. Not with words, but with tears. Romans 8:26 says the Spirit helps us in our weakness with groanings too. Deep for words.d, oh, you understand what that means. It means when you don't have a language, He speaks through your breaking.so, those tears. They were heard, they were understood, they were recorded. Psalm 56:8 says God collects every tear in a bottle. Not one is wasted, not one is ignored. Which means that moment you were embarrassed about, heaven was paying attention. And here's the question you need to ask yourself. What if that wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough? What if the thing you tried to stop was the very thing God was using to free you? Because something happens in His presence that doesn't happen anywhere else. You stop pretending. And when you stop pretending, healing begins. Part 2. There are burdens you've carried so long. You forgot they were heavy. Pain you buried so deep. You started calling it normal. Memories you locked away, hoping time would erase them. But time doesn't heal what truth hasn't touched. And in one unexpected moment, God touches it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but precisely like a surgeon. And suddenly, you feel everything. That's why the tears don't make sense, because it's not just about the moment, it's about everything you've been holding back for years. Hannah stood in the temple, not with polished prayers, but with a broken spirit, crying so deeply that people thought something was wrong with her. But heaven didn't misunderstand her. God responded. Because real encounters are not clean, they are raw, messy, unfiltered, and powerful. Some of you walked into church trying to look whole, but God wasn't interested in your image, that He wanted your truth. Because the weight of pretending is heavier than the pain of being real. And in that moment, you let go, even if you didn't mean to. Even if you try to fight it, you let go. And when you did, something shifted, not around you, inside you. Because God doesn't always fix your situation immediately. He transforms your spirit first. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, 3 times. Imagine the weight of that failure, the guilt, the shame. And when Jesus met him again, he didn't accuse him, he asked one question: "Do you love me?" That question broke him. Not because it condemned him, but because it restored him. That's what conviction feels like. It doesn't push you away, it pulls you closer. And sometimes it makes you cry, not out of fear, but because you finally see clearly. And clarity is overwhelming when you've been blind for so long. But here's what most people miss: your tears are not the end. They are the beginning, because something else is happening beneath the surface. Healing, quiet, invisible, but real, like the woman who touched Jesus' garment in a crowd. No spotlight, an announcement. Just one moment, and everything changed. That's how God works. Not always publicly, but always personally. When you cried, it wasn't random, it was intentional. Because your spirit recognized something your mind couldn't explain. It remembered something you forgot. Who you are, who he is, and where you belong. Like the prodigal son came to himself, not through logic, but through awakening. That's what happened to you. You woke up, and awakening often begins with tears, because you can't heal what you refuse to feel, and you can't return until something inside you remembers home. Maybe, just maybe, those tears weren't weakness. They were proof that your heart is still alive, proof that God is still reaching you, proof that no matter how far you think you've gone, you're not beyond his presence. And next time it happens, don't hide it. Don't fight it. Don't rush to wipe it away. Because that moment might be the exact moment God is rewriting your story. And if this message found you at the right time, then this isn't just a video, it's a confirmation. Don't ignore it. Stay with it. Because what God started in you, he's not finished yet. And if you've ever experienced this, you already know this is just the beginning. Light up faith. And maybe the reason it felt so overwhelming was because it wasn't just about the present moment. It was everything. Everything you never said, everything you tried to forget, everything you convinced yourself you were over. All of it rising at once. And you didn't plan it. That's what makes it unsettling, because control slipped. You weren't managing your emotions anymore. You were experiencing truth, and truth has a weight. There are things buried so deep inside you. You've learned how to function around them. You build a life on top of them. Responsibilities, routines, distractions, but beneath all of that, something was still waiting, unhealed, unspoken, unreleased. And in one moment, in God's presence, it surfaced, not to destroy you, but to free you. Because God doesn't expose wounds to shame you. He reveals them to heal you. Hannah stood in the temple, weeping in a way that made no sense to the people around her, in polished prayer, in composed posture, just raw desperation. And they misunderstood her, but God didn't silence her tears. He responded to them, because heaven recognizes what people misjudge. And maybe that's what you felt, a moment where you couldn't explain yourself, but somehow God understood you perfectly. That's why it hits so deep, because for once you didn't have to translate your pain. You didn't have to make it make sense. You were just seen, and being seen like that breaks something open. But here's where it gets even deeper. Not every tear in God's presence comes from pain. Some come from conviction. And conviction doesn't feel like condemnation. It feels like clarity. Suddenly, you see things differently. Your choices, your patterns, your compromises, not through judgment, but through truth. And truth is heavy when you've been avoiding it. Peter felt that weight. After denying Jesus, not once, but 3 times, he heard the rooster crow. And in that moment, everything became clear. The Bible says he went out and wept bitterly. That wasn't weakness. That was awakening. That was the moment truth broke through denial. But what makes that story powerful is what happened next. Jesus didn't leave him there. He came back. Not with anger, not with punishment, but with a question: do you love me? Because conviction is not meant to crush you. It's meant to call you back. And some of you, in that moment of tears, you felt that call. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, that a quiet pull saying, come back. Let go. Change this. Trust me again. And it shook you, because deep down, you knew it was real. That's why you couldn't stop crying, because part of you was resisting and another part of you was surrendering, and that tension created the tears. But here's what most people don't realize. That moment was not the end of something. That it was the beginning. Because while you were crying, something invisible was happening. Healing, not surface level, not temporary, but deep, internal, spiritual healing. The kind you don't immediately see, but you feel. Over time, like a weight slowly lifting, like a pressure releasing, like a breath you didn't know you needed finally entering your lungs. The woman with the issue of blood spent years searching for healing. Years, nothing worked, until one moment, point, one touch, an announcement, an stage, an attention. Just faith and contact with Jesus. And everything changed. That's how God often works. Not in front of crowds, but in hidden encounters, while everyone else in that room kept singing, kept listening, kept moving. Forward, you were having your moment, personal, sacred, unseen, but eternal, because God doesn't need an audience to change a life. And maybe that's why it felt so intense, because it was just you and him, no filters, no distractions, no pretending. Just truth, and truth changes people. But there's something even deeper happening, something most people overlook. Sometimes those tears are not just about healing, they're about remembering. Not mentally, but spiritually, because your spirit holds things your mind forgets: purpose, identity, calling. And when you enter God's presence, something awakens. That's why it feels familiar, even if you don't understand it. Like hearing a voice you haven't heard in years, but instantly recognizing it. That's what happened to the prodigal son. The Bible says he came to himself, not through sermon, not through advice, but through realization that he remembered who he was. And that memory changed his direction. Some of you, in that moment of tears, you remembered, not clearly, not logically, but deeply. You remembered peace. You remembered truth. You remembered what it felt like to be close to God. And it overwhelmed you because you didn't realize how far you drifted until you felt them again. That's why the tears came. Not just from pain, but from return. And returning is emotional because it confronts everything at once: where you've been, what you've lost, what you've missed, but also what's still possible. And that's the part that breaks you in the best way, because suddenly hope is back, and hope is powerful when you thought it was gone. What if those tears were not random? What if they were evidence that something inside you is still alive, still responsive, still reachable? Because the truth is, if your heart can still break in God's presence, it hasn't gone cold. You can still feel something when his name is lifted. You haven't gone too far. That if tears still come, then something inside you is still saying yes. And that means God is not finished with you. Not even close. So next time it happens, don't rush out of it. Don't hide it. Don't apologize for it. Stay there, because that moment might be the exact place where your life begins to change. And if this message felt personal, that's because it is. This wasn't random. You're meant to hear this. Don't just move on like nothing happened. Sit with it. Reflect on it. Let it work in you. And if you've ever experienced this, you already know how real it is. Don't. Keep it to yourself, because someone else is going through the same thing and they don't understand it yet. And your story might be the clarity they're praying for. Light up faith.